screen here. Okay, hopefully you all are seeing that. So today we're going to continue in the book of Samuel, and in the ninth chapter, beginning around 14, 15. I'll probably read 14 as well. It's been interesting reading through this because I think one of the things what I love about the Word of God is that every time you read it, it seems like you read it either from a different angle, or you miss something, or you really miss something, and all of a sudden the Word just speaks to you perhaps in a different way. And that's what's wonderful about the Word, and why we should always continue to be in it, because we continue to hear a new part of the Word, sometimes based on the season that we're in, sometimes based on what the Lord is saying to us, but sometimes just because we are continuing to grow and continuing to be have a desire to have more of Him and just to know more about Him. So today what we're going to do is continue in the book of Samuel. And I know, as we always do when we kick off, we start off by saying, hey, what did we do last week? So I'll do that as well. Last week, someone talked to me. I know last week we started in the first verse of chapter 9, and the whole topic really was just around, basically, it was kind of funny. It's about two guys and looking for some donkeys, how it started. But someone maybe could just give a one or two little quick highlights or tidbits from our last week's several chapters that we went through. So it's this big guy.
A couple of things that stood out for me that Pastor Cheryl brought up was that Paul from the New Testament was a Benjamite, and that Saul is a Benjamite. So that kind of stood out for me. And she also stated that Saul didn't know that there was a man of God in the area that they were in, and that his servant did. They had been searching for 3 days, and they ended up meeting Samuel.
Excellent. So these guys, they again, Samuel being a Benjamite, all of a sudden they have lost animals. Pop says, hey guys, go find him. They've searched and searched, and while they're searching, all of a sudden it comes up, hey, there's a man of God. We used this word, we didn't say a prophet, we said something else, and we called him another word. Anybody remember what we called him? It's called Samuel instead of a prophet. They said, hey, we hear there is a prophet, or there is a something seer.
Oh, you beat me, James. Go ahead.
I like it. That's competition. I got some more questions. Don't worry, you can jump in next time. A seer. And it was interesting because, and again, I went through it, and guys forgive me because I read it really just literally. They're out looking for these donkeys, and they know that somebody who is a seer, and we said last week that a seer can be synonymous with a prophet, and in some cases, but sometimes the difference can be a little bit of the fact of, hey, what's the inspiration behind being seen? Is it being, from God, or is it just something else, just having that insight? But literally, they weren't looking for no man of God. They weren't looking for something big and grand. They were looking for the donkeys. And it's just so happened, again, I read it literally, so don't strike me from this. I read it just, all they said was, hey, they're looking, but guess what? The servant says, hey, because this guy is a seer, he can help us get what we need. And isn't it interesting how sometimes the person who's the, quote, star of the show, or the person who's the prominent character, don't have the answers. And sometimes, literally, if you think of this almost as a play or as an event, Samuel is in this event, but if it wasn't for his servant, the person that's with him, he would have never even gotten to the place. He would have been looking for those donkeys today or however long, because it took someone that was with him who had insight, who obviously had some level of connectivity, whether it be to, I wouldn't necessarily say spirituality, but at least he knew what the word on the street was in terms of, hey, where can I get some information? And so he tells him, hey, this is where we need to go to get this, to find out what's going on with these donkeys. So again, what was interesting is that this was not some grand situation where if you think back to, well, that's ahead, but I'll say it real quick. You know, when David got anointed, it was this whole thing of they were purposely looking, where are we doing, and it was almost like this grand, what are we trying to do? In this case, it's almost the opposite of someone just saying, hey, we've lost something, let's go find it. It has all kinds of connotations in terms of the whole concept of lost and looking for and then being directed by God, but I won't even get into all of that. But that's how we started last week. A couple questions, again, you know, as we've been going through this, you know, the whole question is, why was Samuel even looking for someone to be king? Was that just something where they're choosing the next king, or it's time for us to take someone off the throne? What was going on? Why was Samuel looking for a king?
Well, because the people no longer wanted God to be their king. They wanted a human figure like the other areas, the other countries. God wasn't enough. So then God said to Samuel, he would appoint a king to them. So that's the reason.
Exactly. He was looking for one because that's what the people wanted. That's what the people cried out for. And God said, that's what you want. That's what you're going to get. So you kind of said it, that Jackie. My next question, and it kind of is something, I'll flip back here to chapter 8 real quick. You know, it was not only people had, you know, they asked for a king, but there was kind of one thing they specifically called out in terms of why they were looking for a king. In back in chapter 8, verse 20, get down there real quick. I'll start at verse 19. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 8, beginning at 19. I'll go down through 20. It says, but the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us, to go out before us, and to fight our battles. So people rose up and they wanted someone to go before them, to be their leader, to go through and be the one, and to be like everybody else. And what was interesting about even reading that, and it really kind of caught me, and you kind of think about even our lives and many of the lives of those around us. Sometimes having God's favor on you, sometimes it's not enough for people. Sometimes having God's presence and God moving on your behalf, people want more. Sometimes people want what everybody else has, regardless of what comes with what everybody else has, if that makes any sense. And then the last comment I will make is, what group? So we say they're asking for a king. They're saying they're looking for a king and someone to go before them, to fight for them. So who was running things before the king shows up? What was happening with Israel prior to this?
Was that the priest and the prophet?
Mm-hmm. You're close. I want this one little word. What, like, think about what was happening literally a few chapters before. Who was the kind of the group, for lack of a word, that was kind of their key figure?
The Philistines.
Now, those were they're kind of the enemies.
The judges.
The judges, exactly. So these judges got every time that there was an issue, there was a battle, there was a situation with the Israelites, the word of the Lord would say, and God rose up a judge. He rose up, someone was brought up who was kind of brought in at the time that they needed to lead, also to administrate, but also to be that person or that leader, and that for that season that led the people. So the judges. So basically they were like, hey, we don't want someone to keep popping in when we need you. Even when God is answering our prayers and he's doing those things that we need and he's giving us what we need, we want a permanent king. Okay. So another question for you. And let's not think about what we know because we've read all of this chapter and future chapters and so forth. And just kind of thinking about, this is kind of our introduction to Saul, our introduction to, what in the future will be, someone that we talk about, have an opinion about, talk about him in comparison to David. We talk about his, some people say his schizophrenia, manic depression, all this good stuff. But up until now, up into chapter 9, into what you may have read in chapter 9, what was right about Saul? Just what was, and I mean, as a broad statement, we don't have to be deep, philosophical, but what was right about him? I'll give you a hint. The people wanted someone to go before them. What were some of the attributes that might have been, something that would have made Saul right for the gig, right for the job?
I would say his presentation. He was a tall man. Mm-hmm. One of the things, and he looked, I would say, kingly. He looked like someone would be able to actually lead them, because it appeared that others, he was taller than anyone, in his family. So maybe that was the same thing in, Israel. Exactly.
What the Bible specifically points out about Saul, it says that he was shoulders higher than anyone else. So what that simply means is that the beginning of his shoulders was at the top of someone else's head. So that means that he was literally a foot taller, almost, than anyone else around him. So tall in stature, which again, he, quote, had the look. Later on, it also says not only tall, but good looking. Just someone, we talked a little bit about that last week or week before. He had the quote, if you wanted the champion, he had that look. What else is just kind of, you think of people looking for someone to be their leader, and not necessarily and again, I think someone said it earlier, they weren't necessarily looking for someone who was praying all the time and someone that knew all the scripture from top to bottom and had could kind of recant all the stories and talk about all of the the lineage of Israel. What is just something else that maybe he had in addition to his general look, height, and appearance that might be something right about him?
I think the other thing that people in general look about, and I was hesitant to answer because I was trying to think of an example, is humility, but with the ability to influence. So it's like a quiet power.
Got it.
I feel like the humility comes with him hiding, right? Because he's like, I'm a Benjamite. I don't even deserve to be here. But when tapped, he actually came out of hiding and did what he was supposed to do for at least for a little while.
Okay. So in other words, this person who's, tall, good looking, but still, hey, okay, I'm, still got that sense of humility, not that boastful, proud, I'm out here, yeah, I'm the right one kind of thing. So yeah, so it's got the look, but it's also got that level of control, kind of smooth, and also just kind of again, that whole control, and we'll come back to that word humility shortly. Anything else, just kind of in general?
He came out of a decent family, and what he did, he wasn't someone leading the family, but I believe that he was just a regular worker in the family.
So yeah, so he didn't come from off the street somewhere or no name family. He came from, I won't say he came from quote money, but he came from a legitimate family who had means. So And again, different time and different system, but you kind of automatically, people begin to equate, if you came from a certain kind of family, that means you have a certain level of training, etiquette, you have a certain level of this, a certain level of that. So it's almost like, call it maybe a level of, for lack of a better word, sophistication, maybe, or whatever. He basically came with that kind of the full package. I raise these questions because it's interesting how when we talk about Saul, because we read the rest of the stories, we don't talk about him this way. We always talk about what was wrong with it. But he basically fit the bill for what the people wanted. And guess what? To what Christy said, it wasn't as though he had his picture on a billboard and was campaigning for the position. Brother man was looking for his donkeys, and he was doing what his father told him to do. And even though he was I'd call it seasoned, is probably not the right word, but a man of means. They didn't say he was like, running over rich, but he was listening to what his servant said. So whatever his servant said, do, he did. So it's like, he wasn't coming in on the campaign trail. He was coming in as an ordinary person, but he had what was required in that time to be named as king. What was wrong with him? Again, based on what we know up until these scriptures here. So not what happens in like 11 and 12, but what was wrong with him from the scripture?
Well, up to this point, it doesn't say anything about his relationship with God.
Okay, that's right. It said absolutely nothing about him giving any sacrifice. Usually they'll say, hey, people went up to sacrifice, or they would, nothing. Didn't even say they were praying for where the donkeys are. They just out looking. So nothing about God. Anything else?
Perhaps the fact that he did not come from one of the major tribes might have been a detriment.
Okay, so he came from actually the smallest one. So maybe that would be kind of this. So why does he not fit the bill? All of those are right. I kind of looked at it from a similar view, but I just say, well, the people said we want somebody to lead us. People said they want someone to go before us. People want someone who looks the part. From what I know now, from my perspective, and both of those are, there is no wrong answer. I'd say not a whole lot wrong with the guy. He's the right guy for the time. And again, I raise that again because we view him based on everything else we've read about him. But when he walks on into this scene, this is what people were looking for. This is who God said, hey, they want this, and we're going to find somebody who can lead them for a season. Okay, here he is. So from my viewpoint, overall, he looked the part, had some flaws buried down somewhere. It didn't really point them out specifically. We kind of had to figure them out a little bit, but overall, he's kind of the package. And so sometimes it's like, what we kind of view people in terms of where they may have strayed, or where they may have something may have happened during their tenure over time. All we can remember is what happened, but sometimes we forget what got them there. They were the right person. They were in the right place. They were doing the right things, and they were there for that season for the right reason. Other stuff happens along the way, but guess what? We always have the privilege, and as we read the word, of looking back instead of looking forward, unlike the people who were there at the time. Okay.
Pastor Porter.
Yes, ma'am.
Just prior to the plot twist, Saul wanted to go back because obviously they couldn't find the donkeys, and he thought that his father would begin to be concerned more about him and the servant. So he was just ready to not give up, but just he could rationalize within himself more than likely that, hey, we got to get back because we haven't found them. And our Father's going to begin to worry about us.
So again, that's almost like the super level of respect for his father, you
and
know?
the dude, yes.
And okay, we've done all that we can do. So we've done what he's told us to do. But guess what? I'm concerned about him. So actually, that's almost another feather in his cap. Isn't that the kind of, you want this big, tall, handsome, sensitive person who came from money. I mean, wow, what else could you ask for? That's what you want for king, kinda.
Pastor Porter.
Yes, sir.
Israel wanted, even though they wanted a king, but like you said, other countries had the king, but all this pomp and circumstance, that's what Israel was looking for, like the other kings of the other countries.
Yep. They wanted the look. And you could almost interpret from what you said, Israel wanted to be recognized. You know, they wanted to be special like other people. But the realization is, wow, you got the King of Kings, Lord of Lords on your side. Look how many battles he's fought for you and won, and you didn't have to do a whole lot to win because he took care of stuff for you. And yet you still want to look like everybody else. Interesting. All right, so let's go. Let's jump into this. This is beginning. I'll start at 14. Let's go the first few verses here. It says, so they went up to the town. As they were entering it, there was Samuel coming towards them on his way to the high place. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, about this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him rule over my people, Israel. He will deliver them from the hand of the Philistine. Oops, I lost my place. Philistines, I have looked on my people, for their cry has reached me. When Samuel caught sight of Saul, the Lord said to him, this is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people. Interesting. So again, they're as Pastor Show said, you know, they were about ready to go. They did the loop back saying, hey, let's go find this man. He's a seer, he has visions, he can go basically help us out. Let's get us an offering because hey, we want to make sure when we go before this person, we want to go with respect and we want to give him something before we say, hey, what can you tell us about what we've lost? And so Saul has, you know, he's kind of done his little, I won't call it argument with God. He's done his petitions to God and kind of rationalizing with God to God said, no, this is what they want. Let's do this thing. He's already told the people, hey, if you get a king, this is what it's going to mean. One of the verses talks about this whole concept of how, you know, he's going to take your kids and he's going to put them on the front line. He's going to take a certain portion of your money and da-da-da-da. He gave the full rundown of what it meant to have this king. They still wanted it. And so now here comes this whole encounter where all of a sudden Saul and his servant, you know, is getting ready to go and look for this guy. And God has told Saul, hey, you know what, about this time tomorrow, I'm going to send you the one. I'm going to send it. I'm going to send him to you. And back to this whole appearance thing. Before he even said anything, before he meaning Saul, before anything came out of his mouth, before there was even an introduction, Samuel caught sight of him. And the Lord immediately said, this is the person that I spoke to you about. He fits the bill for me. And it's like, wow. Again, we all talk about all those things about what Saul was and what he wasn't, but he was the chosen person for that season. It goes on to say in 18, Saul approached Samuel in the gateway and asked, would you please tell me where the seer's house is? I am the seer, Samuel replied. Go up ahead of me to the high place, for today you will eat with me. And in the morning, I will send you on your way and will tell you all that is in your heart. As for the donkeys, you lost 3 days ago. Don't worry about it. they have been found, and to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and your whole family line. That's interesting. And you say, well, boy, why is it interesting? It's interesting because here he is going to look for the seer by chance, by the way. Wasn't in the game plan, wasn't in the cards. Servant has told him what he needs to go do. This is the first person he runs into. First person he asks, hey, where can I find the guy? That's the person who you're looking for. And what's interesting, it says, you know, he's saying where is he? And he says, hey, as soon as he meets him, Samuel just says, hey, you know what? You're going to eat with me today. What does that, what kind of does that mean? Or what would you think as if you were in Saul's place, or if you were the servant seeing this? What is somebody, this seer inviting you to go eat at the big table? What does that say? Or does it say anything?
He has already been prepped for his job by God about what's going to happen today, that he's following and doing exactly what it is, and that he clearly has seen things, because he's already doing this crazy stuff that nobody would do if they had not spoken to God himself.
Meaning from which one, which person?
Well, as somebody looking on, watching him tell me all this stuff without me really having told him anything, him going through this whole thing, this feels like a plan, a setup.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's funny you said, because literally, I mean, as a fly on the wall, as we say, he walks up to him and says, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. And he says, yeah, you're going to be eating with me today. In other words, you should be here. There's no, and what Samuel does is he doesn't even flinch. And that's how precise God has spoken to him. Because again, you go back to the previous verses and chapters, Saul has already gone through his, God, is this the right thing to do? I don't know about all this. But once he's gotten the word and God has said, this is what's going to happen, as soon as he sees the guy, he's like, hey, you're eating with me. Hey, those donkeys, don't even worry about that. I know you're antsy. You got to go do this. So he does a few things by making this announcement. One, he does a prelude almost of saying, you're going to sit at the special seat. Okay, so first of all, everybody doesn't get to sit at the special seat. Let's be clear. No different than at your home or at an event. You know, this is almost, if you think about even at that time when they would actually have, you know, call it this banquet or call it this like a, you know, group of, you know, usually it's like 30 or so individuals at this giant kind of eating area table. Nobody sat down because until you were kind of pointed to where you need to sit. It's kind of like my company, Japanese company, when you go out to eat dinner, you know, particularly if you're a guest in their country or even here, they come to the US and tell you where to sit. But literally they stand up and point, here you sit, here you sit, here you sit, there you sit, wherever. And so it's just one of those things of, you know, what an honor it is to be at the table, but then you're going to be in the special table. What's interesting is that Saul, coming from, I'm not saying he didn't say he was filthy rich or whatever, but he came from, you know, a prominent family. Him doing that was not even unusual. Although later on you see how he responded, but it's almost like I'm made for this. In other words, he is walking into his next in this situation. The prophet knows who he is. He's going to find out what he is, but also anything that's going to be a barrier is taken away, because the key thing he's concerned about, he's really not concerned about meeting Samuel, other than for him to tell him where those donkeys are. And so he also takes that instant opportunity to say, I know why you're here. So he validates who he is by saying, let me give you a little tidbit of what I got. oh, I know where your donkeys are. They're taken care of. They've been found. We'll handle that tomorrow. So he gives him just enough to build that confidence and security there, but also says, okay, today you're gonna dine with me.
Porter, that's exactly what I was going to say, because as I'm reading this, even as a fly on the wall, if I think about today and someone were to come up to me and say, well, first clue was today you are to eat with me. So it wasn't even like he was just inviting him. He's saying, this is destined. You are to eat with me today. Like it wasn't my plan. It's just, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But if I were Saul right there, I'd probably be a little bit suspicious. But then to your point, he goes on to validate it by answering all the questions that could have come up in his mind, or would have come up in my mind, I should say. That just made it clear, like, okay, this is okay. Like, okay, you really don't have anything else to say after that, because he's answered every concern that you would have in my mind in that moment.
Exactly. And I think someone said earlier, when we talked about what was right about him, what was wrong about him, we pointed out this piece of, hey, he's not nowhere is he's saying godly and all this. So now this is this godly prophet who's telling you whatever. You don't dabble in all that, perhaps. He basically takes you straight to, hey, to your point, here's your questions. Here's going to be the thing that you're going to say that's going to tell you not to go in and step into your destiny. I got you covered with that too. But he also gives him that last line is kind of a heavy one, because it's one thing to be asked to go eat with the guy, okay? Gives you a little bit of confirmation of, hey, I got you. Hey, we'll take care of your donkeys. They're good. But then he's like, hey, you know what? And to whom is all the desire of Israel. Blah, 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 blah. Basically he's saying, you know what? All this stuff is about to fall on you. It's like, whoa, what just happened here? That's something. And again, you have to forgive me. I read these like I'm sitting there walking with him. And I think, what would I think given that scenario? So if I say something out of line, that's why, because I always think of what would I have done if I was sitting there with him? And I would have been the same way, like, who is this joker telling you this? Oh, he does have a word. And then I would have said, whoa, he's about to drop something on you pretty heavy, brother. I guess I would have been the servant, the ones on the sideline, having my own internal conversation. But anyway, I digress. 21. So Saul answered, but am I not a Benjamite from the smallest tribe of Israel? And is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you say such a thing to me? So now, again, you're in this scene. You imagine, again, this is Saul, tall, handsome, from the tribe of Benjamin, fathers lost some animals. He's out doing, he's kind of doing his father's will. And we mentioned this word earlier, humility. So I guess the question I have for you all, he's just been told this. He says, but hey, I'm just a Benjamite. Hey, I'm the smallest, we're the smallest tribe, hey, my group, my family is the smallest in that. I'm the smallest inside the smallest. Why are you saying all this? Is that humility or is it not? From your perspective, based on what you know here.
Absolutely.
And there's no right or wrong answer, but what was that? Who was that?
No, that's Jackie. You were saying, was this humility?
Yeah.
On Saul's part. Yes, I would say so. Trying to understand, it's like, who am I to be in such a position? Who am I to even be in your presence? Listen, I was only trying to find the donkey. So all this extra stuff that's going on, I just don't even know. And I'm trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else? I was about to call someone, but she might say something about me, but that's okay. I'll call her later. Anybody else?
Or do you ask, is that humility?
Yeah, it's what he did. Do you view this as humility?
I can see it as humility, but I can also see it as something that they grew up with since they were the smallest tribe. They may have never seen themselves as very important or whatsoever. So if you have that type of mentality, and then all of a sudden someone comes to you and say what Samuel told him, I would question, like, hold on, wait a minute. We're not very important. So why are you telling me that these things? And so I can see it as being humility, but then on the flip side, I can see it as not being humility because of the pedigree and what he was probably used to and what he may have heard about himself, his tribe, and things of such nature.
So you appointed to not humility, but almost like an inferiority complex kind of thing, perhaps.
To that degree.
Not putting words in.
Right. I mean, but that's a great way to sum it up.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? No right or wrong answer, by the way, y'all. I'm kind of with both of the answers. I kind of viewed it both ways. I read it the first time and said, wow, that's the kind of person you want. I think Christian said earlier, with this person who is got the look, got the part, whatever, you expect him to be this one who comes in with this bold confidence. When he's put on the spot, he says, wait, oh, no, wait. You might have missed it, brother. This is, do you know, I might look the part, but we're the least thing going on here. We just, hey, you looking for somebody grand, that's not me. Then the other part of me says, sometimes is that, have you ever seen someone who's just like spectacular at what they do? And every time you compliment them, they say, oh, no, that was, and it almost comes across as like, now, you did fantastic, but it's almost like a false sense of humility. And I'm not saying either or, I just throw it out there because, and again, back to my analogy from earlier, I only ask it because every time we talk about Saul, we talk about him in a certain light. However, as I read this and I take all my lenses of being, what I've been taught, trained, and read about what was wrong, when I just read this, I say, wow, he's just like almost not a victim is not the right word, but he's a beneficiary of a circumstance. And it's like, he's like saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm not quite the one here. I know you this big prophet, but you might have missed it. Do you realize what, you might know about the donkeys, but wait a minute. So, I kind of look at it from, wow, he has got that mark of humility. But unfortunately, when I think about him, the only thing I can think about is later on when we see him throwing javelins at folks. But anyway, again, I say all that to say, read the scripture for what you know up until then, and don't build something else on it. Okay? So it could be either way. We don't know. It comes across as humility. 22 says, then Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the hall and seated them at the head of those who were invited. Can you imagine all these folks who were invited to be with Saul, the prophet? Obviously, probably with people who were, the in the know people, people who were looking to be with him and were looking to hear a word from him. In other words, recognizing God, recognizing the God in him and being with him. He walks in with somebody else and sits them in not just at the table or even at the side table, but at the designated seat of honor. He brings them in and says, hey, you hang out right here. In other words, you sit next to me. And everyone's just saying, like, who is this joker here? Look, he's looking pretty good, but who is this guy? Okay. Again, that's my commentary. Sorry about that. It seated them at the head of those who were invited, again, by invitation only, I guess, about 30 in number. Samuel said to the cook, what's that? Oh, it says, Samuel said to the cook, bring the piece of meat I gave you, the one I told you to lay aside. So the cook took up the thigh with, I can't even read, the thigh with what was on it and set it in front of Saul. Samuel said, here is what has been kept for you. Eat, because it was set aside for you for this occasion. From from the time I said, I have invited guests, Saul dined with Samuel that day. He not only does he get at the big table, that was only by invitation only. He's a person who had no invitation, didn't RSVP, wasn't even supposed to be in the city. God used these donkeys getting away somehow or another to get them out of where, because this wasn't just right around the road. It says they had been looking for 3 days for these donkeys. So they've walked from city to city, town to town, looking for these donkeys. They just happen to be there. Servant just happens to say, hey, there's a seer in town. Let's go see what he can tell us. Saul says, hey, well, no, we can't do that unless we have some money. Servants got say, hey, I got you. Let's go in and see him. Goes to the gate, sees the guy. Hey, have you seen this seer? Hey, I'm the seer. All this is happening now. He's not only is he at the table, he's getting the designated meat that's been prepared, especially for the special guest. What a day, what a difference a day makes, right? He's at the special seat, and it's almost to say, not only do you belong in the seat, I'm going to honor you in this seat. And I'm also going to share this with everybody else to know that anytime they had this, the person who was the designated special person, they would set aside the special cut. You know, it's almost like when you think of the dinner table, it's just Thanksgiving or whatever, there's this always, sometimes there's this special piece of a special cut of the beef or the meat or whatever. That's like the choice spot. That's for the special guests. And that's not only is honoring the guests, but is also sharing with everybody else that this is the honored person in the seat.
Excuse me.
Saul gets all of that.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any significance of the thigh, or just what you were just saying? It's just a special piece there set aside. Is there any significance?
I think it's just this, like the choicest, most tender, best part of that. It's basically it's a designated.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me. Wanted to say this, when you just read and think about all that's gone on, it just makes me think about the mighty God we serve today. He will move all things in order to get you to where you need to be, to the purpose where you're to be. And this whole thing was amazing as to all the steps that were taken. So you could imagine that Saul's mind had to be blown when he got to the table, right? And it's like, wait a minute, all this had already been set up, right? It had already been set up and like preordained for it to happen. So that's the same thing in our lives. If we could just even look at something like this and say, God will move all things, right? So how was it that he went 3 days, right? In that path, how did he know to go to that particular area? How did he know to go to that particular path, you know? But then he had his servant with him. So God lines it all up. You know, that's why he puts people in our life.
Yep. And you're right. Imagine if now, because it's like you could almost, and it is, that's why I was reading it. It's like, whoa, this is something. Because it's, when you think about it, it would have been different if, you know, while he was sleeping, you know, his dad had woke him up and said, son, I just had a vision. You need to go. And they had been praying for weeks and weeks, you know, basically they had done all these things that said, hey, this was us being led to do X, Y, Z. But this all started off with some donkeys that got away. And next thing you know, 3 days later, you're sitting at the choice seat with the choice meal with a prophet. And he's telling you, hey, God's about to do something. You about to be something big. It's absolutely amazing. And it just kind of lets us know, even through our losses, whether it be the donkeys or whether it be a major loss, how, as the Bible says, how all things work together. And unfortunately, like I say, when we read this, we have the benefit of knowing what's about to happen. But only if we could put ourselves in the seat where he is and saying, look at how all this is coming together. I don't know where it's going, but wow. And that's how our lives are. Some of the situations we're in today of like, wow, God is doing something amazing in our lives. We don't know the end point, but all these things have worked together to get us to this point. And now we just have to kind of wait it out and see what else is that God has for us. Last couple verses, I'm over, but I'll get these in. 25, it says, after they came down from the high place, so they've eaten, he sat at the big table. They hung out basically all night, because it's the next day. He says, hey, after they came down from the high place to the town, Samuel talked to Saul on the roof of his house. They rose about daybreak, and Samuel called to Saul on the roof. Get ready, and I will send you on your way. When Saul got ready, he and Samuel went outside together. As they were going down to the edge of town, Samuel said to Saul, tell the servant to go ahead of us. And the servant did so. But you stay here for a while so that I may give you a message from God. That would be one of those like, wow, what else you got for me? Because my screen just died here. I'm assuming you all can still see me.
Yes, we can
Yes.
see you, just not the screen.
Okay, my screen went away. Okay, that's fine. But what's amazing, so now all this has happened, gotta be completely overwhelmed. What a night they must have had, by the way. And then he says, hey, you know what? I need your servant to go away. I got something. And he even told him, he said, I'm going to give you a word later, back when he was kind of confirming who he was. But the whole thing is that he then says, you know what? I've got something to share with you. After all of this has happened, what else could be next? And we'll get to that next week. But I say all that to say, what an interesting few scriptures we had. And really, Jackie summed up the whole thing. Look at how God orchestrates things in our lives, how he orchestrates us to be in places, how he orchestrates people to be with us in those places, to even nudge us to get us to where we need to be at the designated time. When he got to where he needed to be, the person he needed to find was there, and the word was there. He even got his confirmation of what he was looking for. But the reality is what he was looking for was not what God was looking for him for. It had nothing to do with the donkeys. But that was even answered. It was that Samuel, the prophet, now had a word from the Lord that he was ready and prepared to give to him. So I say to all of us too, we all have a word that God has either already given or will be giving. Hopefully you're in the right place, you're listening, and you're receptive to everything that's happening, and not getting stuck in the negativity of it all, but just knowing that God actually has an answer for you and has a plan for you. And it's all going to work out in the end, because everything that happens to us works together for the good, to all of those that are called according to his purpose. Any questions? No? Okay.